And now I'd like to introduce Olha Lypko, who's a psychotherapist. Good morning, Olha. Good morning. Thank you for joining us in the symposium today. Thank you for speaking to us. You are a psychotherapist, a clinical psychologist, and a member of the Ukrainian Umbrella Association for Psychotherapy and also the Nomada Association working with refugees. And for 7 years, you worked with military personnel and veterans and their families. And the title of your talk is A Woman on the Road. We look forward to what you have to say to us.
Hello, dear colleagues. Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm a little bit worried and, moved because of the previous speech, because with Marina we are friends and we colleagues. And actually, we started cooperating because we were working together with veterans and with militaries. And it seems to me that the war is polarizing this cooperation with civilians and militaries. Now I see also some pretty polar, maybe sometimes superior or even hostile attitude to those people who migrated, who left the country. And I would like to talk a little bit about this situation and under is a little bit different prospect. I named my presentation A Woman on the Road, and I meant this road, this path that Ukrainian woman has to go because she migrated because of the war. I have been living for 4 last years, last months of my life in Poland, and what I really like in the culture of this country is they really respect their language and inclusivity in the language. And the Polish people I have been working with, they notice that people do not like such thing as migrants or refugees, and they started saying such words as person on the road or and it really resonated with my feelings because after shellings of my city, I left Ukraine for the first time. I came to Poland. I was working with actually with refugees, and after some period of time I couldn't deal with it. I got back home. I tried to recover. I tried to get back to my regular life, but then there was yet another phase of fear, and I was in a role of migrant in the USA, and I couldn't deal with this pressure. I got back to Ukraine, and now for the third time I have been experiencing this migrant path, and I would like to share my experience and experience of my clients, because within these 2.5 years of full-scale invasion, my clients mostly were women, Ukrainians who for different reasons and at different time left Ukraine. When we are talking about migrants, I don't know whether you have paid attention, but very often they use such metaphorical phrases like flood of migrants in the USA or wave of migrants to Europe. Maybe it looks like some kind of metaphor, very simple metaphor, but it's pretty destabilizing, dehumanizing for myself. The person is lost in such metaphors, and it's like a superficial catastrophization and creation of pressure in the society of the hosting country and those people who arrive. And I would like us today to have more individual approach to this case. So you probably all know about such a classic Maslow pyramid, but maybe you're not all familiar with the pyramid of hate. That is pretty similar, and it shows how hatred is formed. Usually, it starts from basic stuff, basic layer, pretty simple, that is perceived as some kind of bias level or word level. When some stereotyping of people who are different from us. For instance, here in Europe, I am often facing with the fact that a person who is wearing hijabs, for instance, in some public places, immediately it makes us think about terrorism. So it is biased attitude. What happens if we are not working with stereotypes, if we do not challenge such stereotypic attitudes? Then people can go to a very different level to this basic bias. And in my practice, I have lots of parents of Ukrainian children who come to me because this stereotypic attitudes very often happens in school, and children have to live through bullying because of this national component. And if we do not respond properly, then this hatred might get new shades, and then we will already have certain acts of discrimination coming out of it. We already have examples from various spheres. It might be economic discrimination, labor discrimination, political or educational discrimination. And from my own experience, when I was looking for a housing first time in Poland, when they heard that I'm Ukrainian, very often they did not want to rent me the flat. Or when I was looking for a job in the USA, we came to that moment of signing documents, but when people heard that I do not have my own car, they rejected me. So there are so different values of different cultures that might play important roles. Then we have violence level or level of such consequences when actions are already supported not only but by hatred, but also with some violent actions. Here we're talking about rapes, assaults, murders. If there is no response on this level, then society gets to the highest level, to genocide, extermination, and annihilation of one group of people by the others. Why I wanted to talk about this topic, because within this 2.5 years, majority of women I was working with, these were Ukrainian women who left their country because of the war. You see on the slide the places I was working, and I would like to draw your attention about what psychological support Ukrainian women can get abroad. Probably lots of you, dear colleagues, those who are abroad, are now working in so-called non-governmental, non-state organization. It is a great opportunity, huge support, but the disadvantage of such organizations is this limit. Lots of organizations I have been working at, it was up to 10 meetings. They have the opportunity for up to 10 meetings, but it was not enough even to build trust, even though there were various other organizations where we were not talking about that much about quantity, but about quality. For instance, in one of the foundations I was working, we had 22 women, and we were working in therapy with them for several months. What's geography of my clients? It's actually also pretty versatile. I was working with women from Kyiv, from Zhytomyr, Rivne, Ternopil, Kakhovka, Zaporizhia, Kherson, Melitopol, Mariupol, Nikopol, Luhansk, Donetsk, Bakhmut, and lots of other populated areas of Ukraine. Majority of them I have met actually in Poland, because I have visited Poland 2 times, but I also started working online. I have more demand for psychological, and that's why geography is wider right now. Ukrainian migrants contact me from various parts of the world, from Turkey, from the USA, from Switzerland, the Netherlands, Slovakia, and lots of other different countries. When we see such a pressure on migrants, we need to remember Boris Altner, a definition. He's a journalist, that according to archaeologists, almost all people in the world are migrants, and humanity appeared in Africa around 200 years ago and then spread it around the whole world. And I think that he calls the 21st century the age of migrants, and it is grounded. And whether it's a good or bad phenomenon, we cannot evaluate that, but it is there and we cannot close our eyes to it. Of course, there are certain legislation acts, normative legislation acts that control this process or try to influence it in some way. We know that in General Declaration of Human Rights, we know that every person has the right for movement within every country, and the person can leave every country, including their own country, or get back to it. And we see that in reality it does not always work. And here we are talking not only about Ukrainian context. A majority of people probably don't know that, but what is taking place at the border of Poland and Belarus, it's also a huge tragedy, because people are being tortured, killed. They are not let into the country because of some stereotypical attitudes, in my opinion. Since I am a representative of positive psychotherapy, and lots of my presentation will be on this terminological matters. For those who don't know, I would like to mention two important things that in positive psychotherapy, we are using such universal tool as balance model that considers four important spheres in the life of people. It's the sphere of senses, it's this physical sphere, body, nutrition, rest, health, and everything included there. The third important sphere is context and relations, our emotions, traditions, and the fourth sphere is the sphere of activity, self-implementation, and wisdom. And one more important thing we are going to use today is basic settings. It is so when how person perceives himself or herself depends on how the person was raised and how parents or siblings were treated this person, how the person is building the partnership, how the person is open to someone else. So usually we take this prototype from from parents relations, how we respond to the people from different country, different orientation, different views, depends how it we also take it from the attitude of our parents. And of course, another sphere about we, it's about religion, it's about our belonging. On this slide, we have various definitions of migration, more scientific one, more humane one, maybe. And I think that each of you already know what is migration, but I was really touched with this picture that I have here. It's a picture from Katowice Museum, and this installation shows the life of Polish Jews during the Second World War. So we see once again here that migration processes are not some kind of benefit or award. Mostly it's connected with certain challenges. What is the statistic of migrational processes? We see that they keep on growing, and there is no particular amount of intercultural migrants. I on purpose left here empty numbers in 2022 and 2024 because what I see in my environment, what I am observing, it is a so-called migration movement because it is pretty difficult to define the particular amount, exact amount of migrants right now. Because if you talk about Ukrainian phenomenon, that lots of people leave their country and then they get back, and that's peculiarity of our migration as of now. Of course, it is important to understand that for us to talk in one context, what are the types of migration, because migration is a pretty wide concept, but we have to define emigration, when people leave the country, immigration, when they come to other country, re-immigration, when people return to their countries, and repatriation, when those people who were forcefully, who had forcefully to leave the country, coming back. There are some other types, but let's talk about what I'm observing in my clients right now, is that people try to omit such definition, such concept as migrant. People sometimes feel ashamed because of this, and especially they are ashamed when we call them refugees. And majority of my clients, when they are describing themselves or when they come to the first consultation, the first session, they would rather choose the three next other terms. It's, for instance, expat, that is also pretty popular term right now. They are talking about themselves as displaced people, and in this context, the person sees some kind of hope, some kind of the opportunity to control the situation. Or most often, we now use the word guest. I'm the guest of this country. The reasons for migration might be very different as well. Very often we are talking here about economic only, but I disagree with that, and we see lots of examples in the world literature that majority of migrants are connected with political reasons, discrimination of certain groups of society, or huge natural disasters. We also have various types of migration, and here I would like to draw your attention to that we know a little bit more of. It's urbanization when people move from rural areas to cities, but in Europe it's vice versa. Ruralization, people from cities go to villages right now. And let's go back a little bit more to uh, to migration, personal migration, but I would like I visited Larisa Ditkovska workshop before this, and and it resonated with my knowledge, and I would like to share the main things here. Is that intercultural migration, it's transition from one society to the other, from one culture to the other, and what is the most important, from one self to the other. And it's this perception that yourself is kind of disappearing. It's probably the biggest challenge for a person who migrated, because the person who migrated faces certain total deep personal changes on all the levels of the development, cognitive level, because perception changes, uh, affective level, what is felt, what is the level of such feelings, and of course the behavioral level. And all these changes, they are so complicated, they are so sudden that our psyche cannot sometimes survive this. And the biggest problem of cultural migration, according to Larisa Ditkovska, is not understanding of the dynamics of migration processes and personal transformation that are taking place from being transferred to the other social cultural environment. I actually couldn't understand what was going on with me when I was abroad and when I couldn't deal with those challenges and tasks. And I kind of lack this term, some kind of explanation of what was going on, because at that particular moment when you are inside the process, you do not understand that these changes are probably normal. Only when you distance yourself, only having the support, you start realizing and accepting such changes. And it's also important to understand that every person has two fundamental traits. It's our universality, what we are similar, and we are also, each of us is unique. And combination of these two traits will give its own migration. The situation of moving to the other country is the same for everyone, but presence of education opportunities, support, or the absence of support might lead to two various types, different types of opportunities of coping with this situation. That's why some people will find their happiness, will be able to build their lives, and others will be miserable. And also, I would like to mention that within this whole existence of society, we have two extremes. We have tendency to be close to people, to be close to society. Then this joint we prevails, this tribal feeling. But each of us understands perfectly well that there is this tendency to stay alone, and then our self, our individuality prevails. But if to look at the history of humanity and observe ourselves and our clients, we see that this process is pretty cycle, this volatility, this fluctuations from I to we, from self to we. And here it's very important to introduce some higher challenges, something that can give you the hope to move on and the strength to move on. I was really touched by the words of Hamid Pazashkian that right now, these words actually were mentioned at one of the conferences in 2022, that in our globe we have 27 military conflicts going on, but this war might become the last one. And I remember that even when I was a small girl, when I was watching some kind of news with my parents and there were footage of explosions, I and my parents were trying to protect ourselves from that. When I when I asked what was going on, I was explained that it's somewhere far away. So you do not want to consider such things when it's far away, but it's important to understand and to accept two tendencies, two trends. The trend of the person is a universal one. It's to be human. Even if we want to see only good sides, we cannot contradict and neglect dark sides of our personalities, and we are always such combination of good and evil. What I realized while working with clients with such in this migration context, and what I see also within my colleagues, is that it's very important to take into account motivation of that person. that's a stage that goes before the motivation, the image of myself and in the country, how I see myself in this process, psychology of my choice, why this choice is taking place, and whether there was some kind of fact of adaptation. For instance, when I went to the USA, I have a friend there, and I understood that I would not be alone, that I can rely on some kind of support. I got invitations to visit the USA a long time ago, but I always thought that I have never needed it, and I was not getting ready. But since this the preliminary adaptation might include preparing some documents, learning of the language. Another important stage is so-called economic adaptation. What is important to take into account? I think that those colleagues who are in other countries right now understand perfectly well what I'm going to talk about, and they have faced visits. And you have to make your profession recognized and your diploma, and it is very often uh, combined with lots of misunderstandings. And now I have a huge work of segment over 60, so you can imagine how difficult it is for people in this age to learn new language, or at least deal with some initial things that can help them get money. So some kind of additional learning or some courses that will help them keep afloat in some other countries. Of course, economic adaptation presupposes and encompasses knowledge language. People are looking for language courses and practicing certification of their work. It's also extremely important to look for work and for housing. And I have this picture here to remind myself and to tell you what is the huge contract context of a person who comes from the environment of blackout, who know how scary it is, how uncomfortable it is. And when you end up in a completely different world where everywhere is joy, light, some kind of pathos, it really puts additional stress on your mental health. It's difficult to understand, and you feel this guilt that I'm here, that I see it. We also feel anger because people do not use their resources rationally, and all these thoughts, they are examples of this defense thinking that switches on in a situation of such forced migration. Of course, expense of life is very important, because when we go there, we imagine it one thing, but it's different in life. And this phenomenon that those people who end up abroad, very often they still, make this currency exchange, and they understand that, for instance, coffee in the USA is so expensive. How can I afford it when in Ukraine it is such a different situation? Social cultural adaptation. It encompasses values of hosting country. Once again, if we get to the philosophy of positive psychotherapy, then there is Western and Eastern world. Eastern is more emotional, more traditional, more focused on context, and Western world is more progressive. It's the world of advancements, of achievements, and it's very difficult when a person from some kind of rural town, small town, gets into the center of such progressive, urbanized town. Psychological dimensions and culture of hosting countries important. Contexts and concepts that prevail there. Of course, personal boundaries, intercultural communication. So these small talks that in the USA considered very polite might just those people who have forcefully migrated can lead into pretty dead-end situation, because people are not used to such a huge amount of contact. What we often omit is actually physical adaptation. It's moment of distance and transport system. When, for instance, in Ukraine and Poland, in Europe, we somehow understand how transport system is built, then when the person is at some kind of other continent, it might be different, because I have provided example already. Only the absence of car didn't let me work, because people understand the transport system is not well developed, and there might be problems with commuting to work. Also, peculiarities and specifics of housing. If we come as tourists, the person, as on the right picture, we might be amazed by it. But when we start living there, it makes us scary. This urbanization, and that people are so distant, or vice versa, a violation of personal borders, as like on this middle picture, because from your house you can see the window of your neighbor, and it's also a little bit uncomfortable. peculiarities of food and medical system are also very important in adaptation because once again, getting back to Maslow pyramid, it's about basic needs of people. Why is this so difficult to adapt? We need to remember that our ethnical country we perceive automatically within the process of socialization while working with others. But when we are forced migrants, we have to learn with efforts and in very limited amount of spans of time. What I observe is in my clients, and I used to lack words for defining this, but now I know that we have social cultural split. When a person is still kind of feeling sad or taking into account that environment he was raised in, but still try to adapt to the new society or phenomenon of social cultural homelessness when a person leaving their own country feel amazing, feel this terrible guilt and feel extremely nostalgic, and within this period of absence they lose connection with their families, but they are still not their own and their new places. So this person is kind of in between, in limbo, such two spaces. The symptom that we often see in the women, Ukrainian women, is it's this syndrome of postponed life. So women come to consultation and they saw that we saw this amazing vase or some nice cup or plate, and but I don't want to buy it because it might mean that I decide to stay here. No, I will buy it when I get back home. Or another syndrome of living consumed cases when people are in a constant expectation of changes. Also, there is this phenomenon of psychotherapeutic contact. People compensate their loneliness while taking part in psychotherapy. And the one more phenomenon America, those who live on American continent shared it with me. It's so-called dream of migrant. If you know this, if you know what I'm talking about, this is pretty difficult to make yourself legal in the USA. It's a long-lasting, expensive project, and very often people that already get these documents, they say that they constantly dream about two things. Either it's about dream that I got all of it, and I'm going back home, and I do not have those people there anymore, or I am going back home, but I cannot return. So it's again about the split. And what are the results of social cultural adaptation? And here I would like to use this model of acculturation of John Barry, is that there are four main directions. It might be separation when we do not perceive hosting and we preserve our ethnical culture. It's like I'm plus, you're minus. I also observed it in my clients that were saying that Polish language is so difficult. It had so many strange sounds. Everything is closed on Sunday. So person focuses on disadvantages at the same time praising and protecting only its own culture. The second type of protection behavior, it's marginalization when the person does not perceive both cultures. I had such clients too. They were neglecting cold Ukrainian. They were offended their country for leaving. They were calling economical other components, but at the same time they were not doing absolutely anything to get adjusted to current norms. So it's a little bit depressive situation. I'm minus and you're minus. Another assimilation when you completely perceive hosting country, but you neglect your own one. And that's what I see in Ukrainian students, pupils, that they are so afraid of that bullying that very often children coming to my consultation saying that I'm trying not to tell them that I'm Ukrainian. And it is also some kind of protective strategy that might help in certain moment. And the fourth one in integration, that I am plus and you are plus, but when we perceive both cultures, it's a what the person might be amazed with stress with what is going on with some country. The person living in downtown in some kind of huge city might miss their small flat at the first floor of small town. So it can be material losses, human losses, psychological traumas activate because we also lose our old belonging and we form new ones. There is this component of nostalgic feeling. What might help? Any kind of psychological protection, rooting, stigmatization, coping strategy when the person either starts working or communicating or vice versa goes out from it. Some kind of dissociation, which is pretty helpful as well. Very often people might have this transformation of their own self. If you remember this balance model, when they see that they are changing. And in my personal opinion, what managed me to survive, it's when we rely on our identity that survived. When I tried and didn't know how to adapt, I get back to what helped me, my profession. And I also know that there is some other examples of identity. I have my close friend that gave birth to a daughter before full-scale invasion, and she went to Germany because of this anxiety and stress. But this identity, mother identity, wife identity, made her return. I would like to also draw your attention to the stages of work that I saw in the colleagues, and I added understanding in the context of positive psychotherapy. So the first stage is that if such people that for whom it's difficult to adapt to new society, it's very important to stabilize. We're working with this acute stress, with actual situations. And for me, probably the most important indicator here is this sphere of body. And after stabilization, we can get to so-called a little bit superficial trauma work and the sphere, I sphere and you sphere. So we are looking for support and for context and cooperations of particular person. Of course, we have to work with losses, and our whole balance model can be involved here: physical, spiritual, emotional, and other types. And the important element is working with nostalgic. It's we are fixating on the past, and as well as in grieving, we have to give some time for grieving. The same is with migration situation. A person has to live through all of this. The work with transformation, the accent of what we have here and now, and this constant expand in the future. The work of social cultural adaptation. About us, it's getting back to our roots, about our connections with other societies, and pretty helpful is understanding of interpersonal dynamics and according to the model of cultural sensitivity of Hilton Bennett. It looks like this. The first people more ethnocentrism approach when they do not perceive anything but their own culture. Later, it's ethno-relativism when they accept that other culture might be different, but still all these stages are important: denial, defense, minimization of these facts, gradual acceptance, adaptation, and integration into new society. What is the uniqueness of Ukrainian migration? In my opinion, it is this effect of forced migration and the absence of the stage of preparation. Majority of Ukrainian women who left, they were not preparing, they were not learning the language, they didn't even know what country they might end up in. It's very often that Poland was a transit country and people were leaving it. The understanding of IDP, so this temporarily aspect, gives lots of stress and anxiety and fear, because at the beginning people were getting some kind of intervention housing. They were living they were living all together, which also it adds to stress. But we also need to take into account unprecedented support from the world. So on these pictures, the first picture is from Germany, from Berlin. I was there at the first anniversary of full-scale invasion, and it seems to me that majority of you will understand me that even when you are absolutely in a foreign country, maybe alone, maybe you do not have any kind of support, you do not know the language, but when you see your flag, or when you see people who treat you positively, it helps a lot. The second picture, it's Chicago, and it is the first thing I saw. It's also our flag. And the third picture, it's picture from Denmark. As you know, Denmark flag is the oldest in the world, and there is this country respects its flag a lot, and there are no other flags that might be there, but still here in this case we see our Ukrainian flag on their buildings because they are supporting Ukrainian.
Ola, may I just interrupt a moment to ask you, I'm just noticing the time and wondering how much longer do you think you'll be speaking for?
7 minutes, if I have this opportunity.
Perhaps,
5.
okay, a little bit shorter if possible. Okay. Thank you so much. Okay.
Okay, then I will talk really fast. So what I have noticed that how Ukrainian women, how does it usually look like? It's comfortable shoes, some kind of suitcases. Usually this person is living with some kind of strange people or with relatives, so not enough privacy and opportunity for hygiene and a dream. It's what we're talking about first stages. What such women come with? They have some kind of sleep disorders, anxieties, and of course the absence because they feel sadness because their husbands are in Ukraine, and very often those who are without partners, they kind of do not even respond to other men because they have some kind of anger, like how men can be here. There is the war going on there. So there are certain mental disruptions. What I saw in economic sphere or economic activities, that our women take up any kind of work. It's easier for them to say goodbye to money. So material values are already not that valuable. They donate more. Very often they are unfortunately also magnet for scammers, for people who commit frauds, because women with children is a pretty vulnerable category. Very often they depend on social benefits from the hosting country, but they are very creative and they approach such situation creatively. The contact emotional sphere. Here we have pretty conservation of emotions, prohibition to feel joy, lots of divorces, and language barrier. And here I would like to mention new traditions that they are purely Ukrainian. For instance, in Ukrainian at 9 a.m. we have a minute of silence. And I know that in Europe, regardless what is the country, what is the time in their country, there are people who stop and honor those who died in Ukraine at war. Sense sphere, huge, big values, and now people and health. So what we were talking about in the previous speech about this complex of superiority, to being not superior. Yes, here in this plan we have hope and faith and development of superpower. I mean that people take on new professions. Women start driving the cars. They take some other positions. And the 90 people who got to me, they were afraid to start everything from the scratch. Volunteering helps a lot because it gives happiness and connection with their own land, and they can feel well at any place. Here, I think that it's an important component. It's volunteering and making such nets. It's also Ukrainian phenomenon that's from all the world. It was given to Ukraine. A self sphere. It's just samples of phrases that I have heard from my clients. Very often it's about suffering, it's about loneliness on the one hand, and on the other hand, it's once again the accent on their strengths. People who have never lived their small towns suddenly start understanding how to move around on their own and deal with everything in their own sphere. Very often people manage to end some abusive relations or vice versa. They feel more comfortable now. And sphere V, it's also polarity, that we are in some strange country, no one will help us, but later it gets to another category, that my home is where I am, and development of trust and tolerance. Thank you for attention, and sorry for taking so much time.
No, don't apologize, Ola. Thank you so much for your presentation to us, but also for the huge breadth that you have knowledge in this area. There's two comments I'd just like to read back to you that came in the chat. One said, "Thank you, dear Ola. You are our International Red Cross and a high professional for soldiers." And another one said, "You have invaluable insights." So your work is so highly respected and greatly appreciated. And we really thank you for giving us such a full presentation this morning and for bringing us all of your wisdom and understanding, and particularly the insights from positive psychology. Thank you so very much. Okay. And also, I'd just like to thank our interpreter, Anastasia, who is working very, very hard to do the Ukrainian English translations, and she's covering so much theoretical material, but also very emotional material. Thank you, Anastasia. You are part of what makes our symposium possible. It's